so sorry.
You can go home now.
We were here last night for
You're right,
a
Jen.
hearing. Got home late. My husband's out of town, and you know.
I do know. What are you doing over there?
Isolating.
Yeah.
I'm sitting on the side of the table
I
so I
was
can see
just
what it's
talking to
like.
Jen about it.
You gotta have your,
I had to
can't have
send
your back to the door.
I know.
an email
Don't
to
try.
Keep an eye on it.
myself
Oh,
yeah.
in order to get on Zoom because the firewall won't let me do it.
Sorry, I was late. Oh. We have no guests? Oh, well.
That's you too. I forgot what
Rick's not coming?
Hello, Rick. Is Rick here? He didn't say he wasn't coming.
Or Dennis?
They don't like us anymore?
No.
Are we on?
Yeah, the phone is on.
Sorry, I was spelling something else. Sorry, I don't want to leave because they're not here.
How long you have to wait for a select person
Here comes
before you
Dave.
can leave?
Oh, you could have started without me. I've already been here. Been on duty since 8.
Hi, Dave.
Hello.
Did we do it?
Yeah, missed the drop.
How many tries?
Only one. I mean, I didn't get on the first try. I got on the second try.
Oh, okay.
Missing Rick and Dennis.
Oh, I do have Rick. He's not coming.
Okay,
Client call running late, long.
so it's just not coming.
Right.
Okay.
Who?
Rick.
We have a quorum, right?
Just missing 2 people. Missing Dennis. Did you hear from Dennis? Oh, okay. Wow.
Can we make a motion to approve the minutes?
Make a motion.
I'll second.
I think, I don't have my minutes in front of me, but there was a, Cheryl had mentioned in the minutes, that's okay, I can talk.
Okay.
About, Ms. Henderson, supporting the efforts of the committee, but I think the minutes said that she's from CCM. Isn't it ACT-CT, Cheryl?
That is my error. I gave, yes, advanced CT she's from, not CC. Well, hang on. She is on CCM's advisory committee, or ARPA.
Oh.
So she is with advanced CT, but is also on an advisory board, a CCM advisory board. Thank you, Mary Jo.
I make a motion that we accept the minutes with those corrections.
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion?
All in favor?
Hi.
Any opposed? No abstentions.
I'll just mention that we've received three applications so far. Three.
And which
1, 2, 3.
which type of application?
2 were economic recovery from local businesses, and 1 was a community initiative grant from the Shoreline Soup Kitchen. So I'm kind of waiting for them to roll in.
One question I have is, all the people who had submitted letters early in the process, you reached out to them to inform them.
Yeah,
so,
some of them already know, too, like Children's Center and Shoreline Soup
right,
Kitchen.
but I'm talking about like community groups or like, there was that one email that we got that was pretty emotional about the flooding and the crib, I think.
Yep, that's
They're
Miami
aware?
Beach. Yeah.
All right.
I'll go back and double check
right.
against the list originally, but
Okay,
I think it's just time consuming to fill out the application. So
right.
I've heard from 2 groups in the last 2 days that they're both filling out applications, so.
There's many.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for the rubric team met, and we have a draft, but it's still in progress. It's not 100%. So, you 3. Can you give one to Mary Jo behind you and Nicole behind you?
And I get one?
Yeah.
And Dennis gets one?
Mary Jo, here you go.
Thank you.
I'm going to need one.
You got my team in that deal. Don't get it.
You got extras.
Oh, I got one, I got a spare. Got the air and the spare.
Okay. So this is in progress. It's not complete. This is for the community investment. So we envision an Excel spreadsheet with multiple tabs, and so let's say I'm reviewing 6 applications, there would be 6 tabs, okay? When I'm done reviewing mine, I would save it and send it to our master keeper of the scores. Okay, so this is a sample for ABC Company. I'm reviewing it. We try to follow the application. Okay, so if you have your application, we put on the left column the pages that it matches. So yes or no questions are the first 4. Was the application received on time? Was the application complete? Were all the checklists? The back we have a checklist. And was it signed? If any of these are no, we stop right there. It will not proceed for review.
And you resubmit and say,
I guess that's a question that we had. Like if they just didn't take it seriously and didn't fill everything out, no. But if they just forgot one little attachment, maybe, we could say you forgot your attachment.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
I think, but still it doesn't proceed to the next step. Okay.
Right.
So
All right,
it's
so-
considered incomplete for all
Right,
of the better word.
and exactly. Okay.
So do we let the individual who is scoring them, or
We would let the
you
master
should
score you
send
reach
back?
out.
Okay.
But I know if I'm reviewing that it's incomplete.
Right. Okay, so then we proceed now to the next little subcategory. Right on the application, on the very beginning where there's little boxes to check off on page 4. Do you have an innovative proposal to respond to the negative effects of the pandemic, yes or no? And then we ask, does this include premium pay?
What page, where are you?
Page 4 of the application? Of the application.
Page 1 of the handout.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so again, these are yes or no questions. Does it include premium pay? That is not a question that should get a score because some do and some don't. It doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't affect the score. It's just yes or no. And then these 2 questions, which are also asked: did the organization receive pandemic funding, or does this project have other pandemic funding? That's yes or no. Okay. So you can see on the far right column, I filled this out for this sample proposal. Okay. All right, now we're asking which of the 11 categories does this meet? Just put a little X. Again, this does not give it scoring. This is just an X indicating which of the 11 categories.
And that's based on what they put on the
That's
application.
what they put right here on page
You're
4 of
copying
the
it.
application. We're copying it over.
Reviewer's interpretation of what, of,
Well, we've asked them to check it out.
oh, what they, okay. So
Okay.
we're just
So
pulling,
we're basically logging their application in.
Got it.
Right, and because we know that at some point we might consider all of the applications who are in top 5, we want to be able to look at it that way. Maybe we will, maybe we won't do that, I don't know, but okay. All right, so then turning to the next page of the rubric, here we start talking about the proposal. And so this is where some scoring begins. So the first 3 are yes or no questions. You get 1 point for 2 yes. But then now we're starting to score between 1 to 5. Does the budget narrative match the project description? Are the costs reasonable? And there's a place for the reviewer to leave comments if they want to, okay? And then now we're talking about the actual project description. Is the project well described? That's question 1 on page 6. Question 1. The proposed initiative describes how it will address the negative impact of the pandemic on Lyme. That's question 2. Transformative opportunity. That is part of question 2. And then comments from the reviewer. And the next questions.
Hold on, Mary.
Yeah.
What do you review? What do you What's your description of new transformative opportunities? What's a description?
Well, that's left up to the applicant, and there's a question asking them to describe that.
That's the Treasury's wording.
Okay.
And then these are scored 1 to 5. And then the next section is the organization's, it should actually say capacity instead of capability maybe, but does the organization have the experience? We've asked them to explain their experience to implement this project. That's question 3. There's a typo there. Measurement of success of the initiative is well explained. That's question 4. Benefit to Old Lyme residents is clearly explained. Now, we asked the organizations outside of Old Lyme to tell us the benefit to Old Lyme. We did not ask the residents in Old Lyme to do that, but I think that's implied in the project. So we don't want to give anyone inside or outside Old Lyme any kind of leg up on the scoring, so the question is asked of all of them.
I know that is how the question is worded.
Mm-hmm.
Does it matter if it's benefit to Old Lyme residents or businesses is clearly explained?
Yeah, we could say that. We could just say benefit to Old Lyme is clearly explained, right?
Okay.
And then, should partial funding be awarded, the project can be modified and successful. That's question 6.
So these are subjective. This is it.
This
Oh,
is
yeah.
reviewer, right?
Oh, yeah.
This is the reviewer.
Yeah, very much so.
Right.
And going back, we
Because
talked a little bit about that discussion now.
Yeah.
Where this measurement of success of initiative is well explained. We had a little discussion, a little back and forth, and wanted to get the committee's feedback. Whether a well-described project or whether we're looking more for a matrix or both.
Right.
Is how we would score it.
Right.
But that was the thinking that led to that language.
I would strongly suggest, though, that we take one application and do a calibration. We walk through it as a group before anyone starts to score.
Right.
Okay.
It's a calibration for everybody to just get something. And what we could do is, like, block out the top to actually know. I mean, unless it's something like a stretcher, which is fine. But if we could just
That's an idea, like we could do a sample exercise before we start reviewing.
Yeah.
However, what you'll see here in the application score, the max is 53, which is a weird number, honestly, but this is still a draft. We could add more things in here that we want to measure, and so that could go up, but right now this sample organization is getting a 47 out of 53.
On that last one under capabilities, should
Yes.
partial funding be awarded? Isn't that a yes or no answer?
Should partial funding be awarded, if you're only getting partial funding, can the project be modified and still successful? If you look at the question in the application, we're asking them, if you receive partial funding, how would this project be modified? Because if ambulance gets gets half the funding, they can't get a stretcher. But if I get half funding for mental health, I would just serve less people. I would still be successful. You know, there's various ways. Some projects can't go forward if they don't get 100% funding, and we need to know that.
But should that affect their total score? So let's use the ambulance, for example. Partial funding, they wouldn't be able to go ahead, just say that.
Yeah.
For instance, they get a score of 1 or 0, then they end up with a lower score compared to others.
Well, let's say they're asking for 3 stretchers and we only give them funding for 2. I think that's still successful. It's just
So, but say it's a project that they're asking for one thing.
yeah. Let's say they were
And
asking for 1 stretcher for $50,000 and we give them $30,000.
Okay.
That's not going to be successful.
Yeah, but the point is why give
That's
them
a
the
yes or
money?
no answer.
And that's exactly the point of the question.
Haven't we asked them to demonstrate how they would?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's what the question really is. Do they
Have a plan.
Do they have a plan, or have they answered the question about whether they'd be able to raise it?
Should they be penalized for,
They're not, I don't think they're being penalized. I
well,
think
they are in their total score.
No,
They're only getting a 1 instead of a 4.
But that's the idea. The idea is to say, if you're requesting $50,000, sink or swim, and we can only give you $30,000, and you said, I have to get it all or nothing, then you get nothing. I mean, it sounds harsh, but I think that's the purpose of it, is to say, why, and then wherever it goes overall, because at this point, the project can't move forward.
I wish I knew how to word this statement. For me, the total application score has to do with the quality of the application and how it compares to other applications in terms of its importance to the town and its ability to meet negative effects and all. If I'm asking for $10,000, let's not say it's 50. Let's say I'm asking for $10,000 for a thing, and I can't do it with $5,000.
Right.
But the committee should be able to give me $10,000. Let's just say my score is still low. I don't mind the question, but I just don't think it should be part
So
of that
I get what
whole
you're saying.
scoring.
I think that
We need to be aware of it.
we need to
but
be aware that certain projects
We
cannot be
absolutely
done,
do.
right? So, but they shouldn't be penalized for that.
Yes.
Aren't they having to demonstrate in the application what they will do if they don't get full
Hold on.
funding?
Yes, and maybe they won't
So that's the question,
proceed.
is more like, how well did they demonstrate what they'll do if they don't get fully funded?
Well, I mean-
And also, if it was something, let's say, they got 5,000 instead of 10,000 and their project couldn't move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they get a lower score. It doesn't mean their project or the
Maybe
application.
they shouldn't get a lower score.
I don't
It's
think
what
they
Cheryl,
should
they
get-
shouldn't get a lower
They
score
shouldn't
because
get a lower I think
score.
Cheryl's right.
It should be yes, no, and we're aware of it. Like, okay, this project, they get a score of 47, but they're not going to be able to go ahead
Oh, I
with
see what
only
you're saying.
$10,000.
I think, because we make it very clear in the application that the town reserves the right to do partial funding, no funding. I mean, we need to make that clear that you're applying doesn't guarantee you're going to get it.
Right.
Although the goal is to give everybody.
As much as you can.
Right.
But I think we need to talk about that, so thank you for that. I think we need to
Yeah.
figure that one
Yeah.
out.
Okay, so if we were to even just remove this right now, and because this, we still have more pages to look at, so this might go someplace else, okay? So if we were just to remove this.
Which one are you talking
Even put it on the front page, yes or no.
Just that one question, I think that should be moved to the front page.
Yes.
And the reason I say that on the front page, because if we have some that could be partially funded, then we could divide those in, the fully funded ones could be here, the partially, when we get to the point where we have to start making decisions, that they.
That's not fair either.
No, I'm not saying that they wouldn't get full funding, I'm just saying that they could, if they could be successful
Well,
if they
you
were.
know, we haven't decided yet how we're doing
Okay.
any
All
buckets.
right. Okay.
So,
I see where you're going with that, Martha, but I think it's better to keep it as much as possible per
Okay.
page of the
Okay.
application.
All right.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
but
so if we just remove this question right now and shelve this
I also wanted
concept.
to just ask Mary, what Mary hasn't said yet, and that's the 1 to 5, the key. We need to identify what a 1 is or what a 0 is, for example, what a 5 is.
Yeah, on a scale of 1 to 5, yeah, we have to explain that. So,
Before you go to the next page, Mary, the costs are reasonable to the project?
Right.
Or like, is it $10 million because it's a $20 million project? You know, like, what does reasonable mean?
we're talking about the budget and if the costs that they've itemized are reasonable.
For what they're proposing.
For what they're-
the
So we can
project.
say for the proposal.
Based on whatever my limited knowledge is, whatever the project is, right?
Right, so yeah, so like conduit piping costs $100 and normally it costs $25, but that's
Okay.
inflation, like
Right.
there's a lot of,
You know, say they put all kinds of other things in their project proposal, like a golf cart, and, you know, or something that has nothing to do with the project, you know, I think maybe we should say the budget is reasonable. I don't know, the budget and items are reasonable. I just think,
budgeted items are related to the request?
well, if you look right above it, it does say,
Yeah.
budget narrative matches project description,
So maybe that covers it.
you know, so if there is a golf cart thrown in there, like, maybe that is,
Not a golf cart, it's an ATV, okay.
you know what I mean? Like,
I think costs are, I like having budget narrative matches project description, very important. You know, you can read through it and go, yep, it looks like you're going to do what it is you're going to do. I think to your point, Mary, if somebody puts a Buick in the middle, we have to be able to, somebody, whoever's reviewing it, has to be able to say,
Buick.
why?
Buick.
You know what I mean?
Right, but the question is ambiguous, because when you see costs are reasonable, that means,
For the proposal.
To who?
I like
Yes.
that.
right, or like,
Based on what?
yeah, exactly, it's ambiguous, you don't know.
That's all it is. It's ambiguous.
Does it mean like they inflated, they inflated the cost.
Something, let us know, but.
Yeah.
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 Or we could say costs are reasonable for the project or something
For the
like that.
project or for the proposal is what I wrote in.
Okay, so,
And if a reviewer says, I can't answer that question, then they can't answer that.
right. I do think there has to be some real thorough review of the budget, you know. That's, I think, what this is getting
We've
at.
already looked at a couple of proposals that Dave had presented early on. We saw quotes. We went to the website for the particular itemized. I looked at everything. The quote was accurate. The ask, that's a different one.
Right.
How many of each item might be up for discussion, but the budget, the purpose, it all seems to make sense. And as a reviewer, I would say 5 is perfectly makes sense. I would say 5 or something like that.
We're tabling this one question about should funding be partially awarded, the project can be modified and successful. I do think we need a way to to grade the answer that they give, but let's table that for a minute and think about the best way to word it, because,
I think that's important, because if they can't move forward with the project, and I get that nobody wants to wreak detriment onto the person that can't complete the project, but I also feel that that's money, if it's not gonna go anywhere, it needs to go.
yeah.
somewhere
So,
else.
we're going to get, let's say we get 25 proposals, and when we add up the grand total, it's far more than 2.1 million. How are we going to make those tough
Right.
decisions?
We're gonna make a lot.
And I don't know, but, I think some of this will help us, and then looking at the 11 categories and how the community ranks them will help us, and so...
And conversely, if we get to the end of it and we have money left, maybe we go back to one of those projects. I don't think that's gonna happen.
Is the goal to spend 2.1?
The goal is to spend whatever money is allocated for each.
Okay, so we...
30th.
The caveat that we've only got 10.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always this fear that somebody would say, oh, sorry.
We're not going to get the other half? So then we stopped at this point, okay, as a rubric development committee. But there's 2 more pages here, because then we were looking at what we called specialty scoring, which would not, we don't want it to affect the total, but might be like a side score for each of the 11 categories, because some proposals will fit more than one category and will get a different specialty score than others, and some are just simply one category. But Mary Jo, why don't you discuss this, because you...
Okay, I put the categories that were allowed under the Act and under application. I'm not sure I put them in order of ranking. I can't recall if I did that.
You did,
You're close.
because affordable housing is last and
Yeah.
sewer is first.
And,
so.
Okay, well, I knew that one. I knew it was last.
We got those 2 right anyway.
Front of 11 for sure. And this is more where our committee reviewers have the opportunity to evaluate the projects, the proposals one by one. And again, as Mary said, everyone will be on a tab, and then someone will be. So let's just say infrastructure projects. How do the reviewers look at these with some similar basis, or the idea of those questions on the question? Is the project equitable? Is it affordable? Can we do this? Does it meet that required timelines, other sources of funding? Just some things that all the reviewers would keep in mind as they're reviewing each proposal. So we have some sort of common baseline. So it's more fair. Same with assistance to nonprofit. And I took these mostly from other communities. And a couple that I couldn't find anything. Like number 4, mental health services or other public health services. I couldn't find a comparable set of criteria, so I just suggested addresses the mental health and behavioral health crises, which worsened during the pandemic, ever since but just wanted to have a common baseline for everybody, and then you score each of these projects we had suggested a score of 1 to 10, 1 being not really, but sort of, and 10 being hit it out of the park. Makes perfect sense for what the ARPA process of money. And so I did that for all 11. And this is where I think we really need to have some discussion, if that makes sense. Are these the kind of thought-provoking questions and comments that we want? Is that how we want to do it? And obviously the score of 1 to 10, does that make sense to people?
Well, I like it because it's personalized to our survey. I know the other one too, the rubric questions try and inform you, each one of the questions, but it's the priorities that you were given by the survey results. So, is it going to get added to the other score out of 53?
And that's the other.
That was the other
That's not
question.
fair, because it might, one
You might have
application might
two,
be in
yeah.
3, and they're gonna get 30 points as
Yeah.
opposed to someone that is.
So you have 2 scores kind of
Yeah,
side
so
by
there's
side.
some way to evaluate, like,
So why do we need this?
good question.
Well, and again, when I first was drafting this, it was basing it on our survey results. How are we going to bring in the survey to the rubric? So this may not be how we want to do it.
Right, it may not be necessary.
Or maybe-
We want to have it separately, we want to say, the first 4 out, and that are rated highest in our rubric, and they get a weighted average. I don't know. But when I was drafting this is the only way I had of evaluating what the community has weighed in on. So we may not need this. But if we are going to look at, if we involve our results in the community in this, then we have to have some way of thinking about it in a similar fashion, baseline.
I think, two things are coming to the forefront for me. One is when we do the calibration piece, I think this is a good mechanism as part of that, as well as for the survey, because I'm not sure the 1 to 10 method is the way to go. They've gotten their score through the rubric. Whatever the score is, it is. These are, I would think these in the end aren't comparatively, the scores aren't comparatively equal, but they could carry weight, meaning that when you're, and I'm just throwing this out there, meaning that when you're done, everybody whoever this one applicant is gets all 10s on this. It's not that it's going to points against their application, but it does assist the review committee in making maybe a tough decision.
But maybe you could do that by actually giving points on the first page, so that if one was in 2 categories, they'd get an extra point. And so their score would be higher.
We thought about that a little bit. We talked about that a little bit this morning, because how do is it, again, just because I'm not doing infrastructure work, I'm doing mental health work, or if I'm doing an infrastructure piece and some mental health, now I get 2 points.
We wanted to make sure that each application is compare apples to apples, and if you're gonna throw that in there, then they're not apples to apples.
Gotcha. That's why I like the fact that it comes at the end, and I think the first part, the rubric, kind of does the job of filtering, the applications, the requests, and then this part is more, I think it's subjective, and I don't think somebody should get 100 points and another guy gets 43 points, but you might look at it and go, you know what? To help the reviewer sort of get a balanced look at what the public wanted, because the public's going to say, why is affordable housing at the very bottom of your survey? And 2, did you really care about what we did in our survey? And this is one way to address that.
So does this, I'm struggling with this a little bit. So does this scoring intend to answer the question? It's almost like, how well does this project address one of these?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it sort of expands on the X on the other side.
I guess, and the thing is that we haven't decided as a committee how we're going to allocate the funds in the different 11 categories, and we're trying to well, if we decide to do it this way, then we've already asked the right questions. But if we decide to do it that, and I don't know how we're going to make that decision, you know, and I don't know if we can until we see what we've got.
Applications.
I think the
And so just trying to,
Just trying to develop a framework. some
Yeah.
kind of framework.
But I think that's the real key. We don't know what we absolutely get. We know a few of the things on Jen's list, or on our list of what we're going to get. We've all heard of things that we expect to get. But if the other thing with this is, if you had two proposals, say, in the same category, it may help us evaluate those individual projects in the same category. Does one really, really seem transformative and are they an organization that we know can be successful, has a track record of being successful? I mean, that particular proposal within that bucket may deserve a higher score and may deserve more funding.
What if, instead of this being a score sheet, the goal were to, at the end of our whole process, have a master list divided by the 11 topics of, 3 proposals under I'm not going to pick infrastructure, that's too hard. 3 proposals under tourism. Here's how we address tourism. We have one proposal from, I'm going to make up things, Lime Art Association to increase art visitors to Old Lyme. We have one proposal from XYZ to improve wayfinding among visitors in Old Lyme. We have one proposal from Soundview to offer more evening activities to summer visitors. And we just create this master list of who, what under that category, and then maybe their score on the earlier sheet, so that we can have kind of an overall view of what proposals do we have, how do they address our 11 categories, and then at the end, if we're taking off which ones don't get funded, we have a master list showing us here's how we are addressing these 11 categories.
I think that's a good idea. A master list, if it had the name of the organization, the dollar amount requested.
Yeah.
But what I hear you saying is that we won't be judging how well, which is what disappears, right?
Well, that's my suggestion.
Yeah, I think the how well is really, really difficult.
So maybe there is some information from these back 2 pages that could be put into the front that would be a little more generic, that wouldn't be...
Do you have it here, the category? I mean...
Yeah, we asked what the categories are.
Yeah.
I think,
And
I'm
I think
thinking...
that the how well will come through in the strength of the proposal, and not only the proposal narrative, but in the budget narrative. This feels just kind of tricky, dicey, and extremely.
Unfortunately, we're going to be in the business of doing some evaluation.
Right, but
As much as uncomfortable as it feels.
That's why we're here.
We're going to be in that. We're going to be in that business.
Right.
And probably having maybe not in this fashion. I kind of liked where you were going with the do it like a news report, do it when, where, how, and why. Do that piece, and then based upon the score on the other side, you can look at 3 competitive proposals. And sort of root out the one that works. Maybe it's the same idea, but it's a little reconstruction.
So, I do, but just looking at the first one, the number 1, infrastructure, equitable, affordable, meet the timelines. That question, meet the timelines, could be asked about every single application we receive, and we haven't
same
asked
with
that.
equity and inclusiveness.
So those questions could be put somewhere at the beginning and asked of everybody.
And ask up front, and then you weed it out.
Right. It could be yes or no questions,
But you want to be able to, I think you want to be able to, again, maybe not in this format, but once you're done scoring and getting your yeses and your nos, then at the end, you want to be able to, and I'll use your example, those 3 proposals, and say, of those 3 proposals, who, what, when, where, how,
True,
why.
because one of those proposals that could be in other categories if we have a bucket of X amount for a particular category, we
Right.
put them in there and remove them from the other
The
one.
other, yeah.
So, once you get to the very end of this, the final few questions after the specialty score is calculated, then we come to, would you fund this proposal, yes or no? And what funding level would you recommend? Yeah, and I think there needs to be a place for overall comments at the end too.
Right.
But, and then actually going back to that one question on page 2 here about should partial funding be awarded, possibly we could just change that instead of a scoring question to a yes/no question.
I agree.
And then should partial funding be awarded, the project can be modified and successful, yes or no?
That's what I was saying.
Right.
So
Rain, you're out.
And they have to answer that question.
it is
in the
question 6.
application? It's in the application, yes.
Yes, yeah, all right, so,
And I do think a comment section after the end, because you're going to say, I don't know how many people will be reviewing, but, should this project be recommend 75%? There may be some difference, and then just a little comments, the reason. The reason you should get it.
What would be an example of why you would choose or recommend funding something at 50% if all the money is available?
Well, I have an answer. A lot of nonprofits, I think, are going to look to us to make a judgment on how much to give them. And so not knowing how we're going to do this process, because we're just figuring it out ourselves, they'll put in an amount in their application. So they'll pull a number out of the hat that's defensible, but that they may believe that they won't get funded because they don't know how much is available.
Right.
And so they'll look to our committee to decide, okay, you asked for 500,000, we can't give you 500, but we can give you 3. I think a lot of that's going to go on. So it's not like it's an absolute thing. I want 2 stretchers for the ambulance and they cost $50,000, 25 each. That's cut and dried. And you can either get 1 or 2 stretchers. But if you're a nonprofit and you say, I've got needs of $8 million, I know you're not going to give me $8 million because you've only got 2.1. So we're going to put in for 30 or 40 or 100 or 200 or 300. And then see what comes back. And we'll be grateful for anything you give us. I think a lot of people are going to be there, and they're going to look to us to arbitrate that.
I guess so, but wouldn't that be economic recovery as opposed, I'm seeing this as creating...
It would still occur on the incentive side, too.
when I sat on the review panel for Hartford, some of the applications, I think this question should be worded differently. If you had all the money in the world, would you fully fund this project? Because there were some that I wouldn't.
Right.
So
just they didn't have, the proposal wasn't strong enough.
wasn't strong enough, or it was just unrealistic, that amount of money or something like that. So I don't know if we should be judging who's getting 50%, 75% at this point in the process. I
But
think
ultimately, we'll have to.
Right.
yes, we will. Ultimately, we will have to. But I think, if I read this application and I become the expert on this application, and when we are as a group deciding who to fund less, I would advocate for the ones that I felt were the strongest. I don't know.
And again, that goes to the questions you asked earlier, even though in a different way. And I'm also thinking that, and I'll use your example, Cheryl, again. Maybe you think wayfinding is the most important thing that people need to do before they can go visit your place of the 3, and they're all looking for whatever the $5,000 or $10,000, whatever they're looking for. And when you look at it, you go, I'll fund that 100%. But I think, putting a new point of sale or whatever they're going to do at Florence Griswold, not so much. So I'll do that. We will be making those types of judgments.
Right.
So I see the value in this, but I also think that, to your point, if you had all the money in the world, what we're doing, you got to have a frame of reference, and I think once you get through the what or ROI, and you get down here, it becomes a little bit simpler.
And at the end, we'll get into things like equity and balance, and does it serve more people or less people? Subjective questions, so that we're happy with the whole picture when we're done with all of it. And you're not gonna know that until you'll be iterating at the end, saying, well, if we give them this, then we're out of balance over here. And we'll be having arguments about fairness and equity for the population.
Discussions, not arguments.
Yes, but some projects may only serve a small number of people,
Right.
but may be very worthwhile, as opposed to some
There's
that
that.
serve the broad. And like,
Yeah.
how do we measure that, you know?
That becomes,
Affordable housing, that's gonna serve a very small number of people, you know? As opposed to something that, you know, a big program that one of the museum might do that could bring in hundreds of visitors, but it's what the product is.
right, and I think the strength of the application, the score, the evaluation of that, however that gets done under the subcategory, and whatever that looks like, kind of when you're done, sort of filtering that all through, you wind up with a place that you sort of become a little bit more adept at doing the subjective piece.
Now, how's advocacy going to be handled? Are we going to have people come in and plead their case to us, or are we going to plead it amongst ourselves based on the
I
application?
think we've got a good group of folks here.
Yeah,
I agree. I think we become experts in our little area that
but so often advocacy wins the day. You know,
Right.
they've got a good script, a good presentation, and they win over the group.
but we're not inviting people to make a presentation.
That's why we need lobbyists.
No, we don't want
But we have put in our application that we reserve the right to call them in for a meeting if we have questions but
Right.
I don't foresee us doing that, you
But
know.
that'll happen as the
Later.
funnel gets narrower and we sort of started, we know how many applications we've had, we've looked at them, we've got 3 outliers that we want more questions from. There was a question that was asked and they said it would go back for review again. And I think that's important because that's the filter that would cause them to come in and maybe just talk to you, Martha,
They
you know?
plead their case by filling this application.
Right, they should be 100%, so if we're calling them in and asking questions, they probably don't have that strong an application, one would think.
Or we don't know enough about what they.
Correct,
Even though they've got a great description, we're just not an expert in that field.
we're not in that sandbox.
I think it will play out to be a little easier. First, the context of the innovative and transformative, which if we get and even one transformative application, I'll be surprised. And to me, it's all about the picture that the
Right.
application paints. If I can understand exactly what it do, what the impact will do, and I just think it's going to be a little.
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
yes, it's going to.
I think we're making it a bit more complicated,
Yeah,
but
I think
we're trying to anticipate what's going to come at us.
Yeah.
You know what I
I
mean?
don't know.
Yeah.
So how to resolve these last 2 pages, you know, the specialty scoring, it sounded like we could take a couple little areas and put more general questions on the first page, and is this something that we just eliminate?
Or do what Cheryl suggested. Use
Well,
it-
that's different, I think,
That's
yeah,
different,
that's an
yeah.
overall master list.
Yeah, that we
Yeah.
need, that we
We'll need
need.
that anyway, right?
Yeah.
So,
Idea that we would have some kind of master summary, like every reviewer would have their own page, each page they read, but we have to have a master summary showing what we have and under each category, how many we had.
And we would measure, the committee would do that, again, going back to the 3 things.
Okay.
The committee would do that. Of these 3, this is the one we think we're going to fund. Of these 5, or we're going to fund them all, you know, but we're going to give them proportionately different money or all the same money or whatever it works out to be.
We're allowed to go as many rounds as we want. With round 1, this is what we're gonna do, we ran out of money, we go to round 2.
Right.
so maybe what the rubric committee could do now is take these comments, go back and update this document, tweak it, send it back out for review
Yeah.
Agreed.
Sounds great.
for our next meeting. When is our next meeting?
We have to
Next
decide
week.
that at the end. No. We decide after today if we keep
Next
going
week.
weekly or go every other week.
Next week, people.
Yeah.
And if each person who's...
By the way, it's 1 o'clock
People
Wednesday, just so you know.
It's 1 o'clock.
Each person here from their respective groups could take a look at this and mock it up with one of the projects from your specialty. That would really, I think, help identify any holes or any questions
Right.
that need to address.
This is a committee question. Do you want to run all that stuff through one person? Meaning, you make your changes and then submit them for somebody to modify the master sheet? Or we just, how do we want to do that?
Well, I mean, I can take the changes we've discussed right now. And
Right.
and modify this and send it out to the group, and then we'll just reply by email.
Okay.
And then on Wednesday, or whenever our next meeting is, bring the next draft, and maybe what we could talk about at the next meeting is next steps after that, because once the applications come in, they can be logged into this master spreadsheet, so, and then assigned a reviewer. And then
We're sort of off.
I'm ready to go.
Good. So does that mean, I'm going to ask another sort of, does that mean we'll be meeting at 10:30 in the morning before the meeting on Wednesday that's probably going to take place?
No.
Or earlier before?
I can't meet on Wednesday in person, I'm
Yeah.
heading out, so I would say no to that, but on another day.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Will the committee have it?
So maybe, okay, from what I'm hearing, I'm just going to assume, but maybe what we do is take a break next week, and you send out this stuff via email,
Okay.
and people can chime in. We're certainly not going to review anything until, deadlines don't close till the next week, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have that next Wednesday.
Okay.
So the 20th would be off, the 27th we'd be here.
So
I could be,
I'm wondering too, if we want to take a day in May and block out like an entire day that we have as our review, like as a team.
That was what we were going to discuss today. Thank
Yeah.
you for remembering.
For the practice review?
No, the final, like, once they're in, the practice review, we could do it in meetings, maybe.
Right.
But once we all go with our assignments and then come back and have a full day to hammer it out, we may need,
After we've done our review?
yeah.
And does George send us something too for that
Well, this,
offsite?
Yeah, we haven't even talked about George.
we haven't even talked about the economic recovery.
George is going to send you 15 and then 20 and then the mass when it comes in all
Oh,
at once.
God, okay.
He's
So there's
very
gonna
good
be
about
that.
responding immediately to the application.
What's
Oh,
that?
good.
No moss grows under George.
Okay.
He responds and because the second application that came in was incomplete and I didn't realize it. And he's like, where's page 4? And I'm like, oh, okay. And
Okay.
he followed up on it right away.
Great.
So he's doing his piece of business. But
Absolutely.
I think what's going to
Believe me.
I think what's going to happen is he's going to send in, 4 applications, then 8 applications, then whatever comes in the final day.
We gotta wait for 4 applications to come in.
So as I understand it then, we're gonna make these changes, we're gonna send it out to everybody for thought. And we're gonna make more of the review, the thought-provoking part under the categories, and make that a little bit more, the
Yeah.
guideline for the key is gonna be, does this meet economic impact, does it meet, is it equitable? Is the budget make sense? Those sort of questions, so that we have some kind of developing key that everybody looks at the same, or as a baseline, right? Okay.
Question.
And you're going to get them back to us over the next week, right?
yeah.
Okay.
By when? By maybe Tuesday of next week, everybody has their comments in?
So,
That would work for you?
sure, but we're not meeting Wednesday.
Right.
You're saying, and then we're meeting on the 27th?
And I think, should we try to do a calibration one on the 27th?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think see how it works.
Okay.
Because hopefully all the comments will be
But if we're
incorporated.
going to do a calibration one, we have to have time to review it. We have to get it in advance and read it. Or are we just going to read it as we go?
I would read it as you go. It's better to talk it out as you calibrate.
Question.
I mean, we can send it out in advance.
I think you need
But
to. They're going to be long.
Some,
Yeah.
In
I
the,
could calibrate you on a short one.
in the original notification that went out across the community, it identified community support or the community initiative and the $10,000 deal. Also, if I remember correctly, there was some wording in there in regards to individuals with families and assistance to reach out to you guys directly. Why is it on here?
It's a separate fund outside of this. Oh, why is it on here?
Yeah, why is
Oh,
it?
I thought you were saying, why isn't it on
No.
here?
It's one of the 11 categories from our survey.
Yeah,
Right.
item 8 on the first.
A nonprofit might be applying, and part of their project is going to be doing that.
OASB could apply.
Like Shoreline
Like,
Soup Kitchen.
yeah, the soup kitchen.
Put that on their
Yeah,
application.
that would fit.
Because it does help individuals and families.
Or the
Okay, but we're not looking for
applications from individuals are
applications
not
from
allowed.
individuals. Okay.
No.
So this is based on if the organization requesting funding is referring to this.
Right. Food bank or
Right,
something like that, or
Okay.
food kitchen or.
I have another broader question when we're ready.
Oh, bring it on.
We're ready.
Blue, paint it blue.
You're going to like this. The arts organizations. We had a discussion back in the fall that the thing they believed would best help tourism is what I mentioned as an example earlier, wayfinding signage. Think of Old Saybrook. There are many other towns that have beautiful signs telling you this way to the beaches or this way to the arts district or whatever. You can picture them, I'm sure, in your mind. This is something the arts organizations have no jurisdiction over, but they're in no position to lead a wayfinding program. In other towns, economic development leads that kind of effort with other town offices, but as the EDC chair, I can tell you we don't have the people or the resources, the manpower, whatever, to lead that kind of effort.
No, you got enough to lead it. You need supporting organizations to stand with you on it.
So the question is, I know at the end we were going to look at these 11 categories and say, what is missing here? Is that something that I need to be out hunting for a sponsor for the CI grant, or is that something that we see as missing and Board of Selectmen or something address it?
Is it your ward of town department like anybody else, and so that your EDC can request that as a process?
Yeah, we could, but we
She's saying we don't have to
couldn't
be
run
in
that. Like, we couldn't.
She's saying she's had zoning.
Or historic
She
district.
wouldn't be able to do it open.
But you.
No, I mean the whole,
Well, why can't you put in an application?
Yeah.
Put in an application for $1,600
This partner and this partner and this.
to do this type of
got all
sign
yeah.
to be installed by Public Works. You partner with,
Don't I have to get all
Metal signs.
well, whatever sign,
Okay.
whatever. Come up with a design, come up with a theory of how many signs, come up with a theory of where they would be placed, give a narrative of why they're important, and identify partnering with a municipal public works department for the installation on state and town roads.
I think what you're saying, you get that part. What you're saying is you have no authority to implement it.
Well, I have no authority, and we're spread very thin as volunteers on the EDC. So I don't even see, when you look at how other towns like Saybrook does it, they bring in a wayfinding consultant, and they come up with a whole strategy, right? Wayfinding.
Signage.
Find your way.
Signage.
Find your way.
Find
That's
your
all right,
way.
I'm sorry.
My weight, I was.
Tourism lingo.
It's a
right, so-
find your way sign.
Okay.
Maybe you
I
can't
think you
apply.
do that.
Maybe you can't apply.
Why can't you apply for the funding for the wayfinding?
But
Don't I have to own that whole process
No.
if I do?
no, your project, your project could be what it would cost to have a wayfinding consultant come in and do the
But
task.
Yeah.
that's a good question. I mean, does that committee have, to your point?
I have no jurisdiction.
Yeah, but they would know the people that you bring in. Right, you would have to go to DOT, up to District 2 to figure that out, you would have to go to Ed's.
So why don't you put the money
figure
to
that out.
hire a Wayfair consultant?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
There you go.
But then we need money
Seriously.
for the signs.
So they can tell us how to get the money.
What is Nicole?
I think you talk to the selectman or Tim or whoever you need, to back you, and for something like this, and then I agree, hire a consultant to do all that legwork for you, and then maybe at that point, we can look at extra funding for signs, because maybe you don't want some junky sign, you want some nice wooden one carved by.
The historical, like what the Historical Society has done.
Right, and it might have to go through them, so I mean, at least if you have all the information ready to go, here we want to put.
Right.
And that's
Maybe
their
there's some other
task.
grant
And their
opportunity.
task is,
And then Tim brings in the players, okay, Ed from Public Works or zoning or whoever else, and
It's a very tiered project.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and everybody has to come into play. And can we get it done by 2026? Yeah.
Well, sure, but can the application be done by May 2nd when the selectmen next meet May 1st or May
that's,
3rd or something?
All on how well you write it.
Well, your application to this committee relies on, and basically I would, and I don't know why, I shouldn't be talking about,
Yeah, you shouldn't be talking.
Yeah.
I think because in this particular case, you guys have discussed it in public meeting, it's in your minutes, it's well represented in neighboring communities in southeastern Connecticut. You state all that, you could say, next step would be, if we're funded, we would get a expert
Consultant.
to run, basically like, for example, we had DSC group do everything we needed for zoning. We hired that group to do all that. That's what you would do with this funding. You would ask the town, if you go through all the zoning and planning and all that steps you have to go through by government, then you would request, if you didn't have enough money for signs to complete the project. I think you can probably even worry about the cost of the signs. Your proposal really is just to get the consultants to do all the work.
Right.
Okay, talk to all the
I agree.
departments.
right.
And then, how much are going to be signs?
I think we have to be careful about giving proposal writing advice here, unless others.
I hear you, Ross. I'm just,
but if you were having,
It's just an end department.
but basically, I think
Right,
what
but I
you're
don't-
doing is you're joining forces with some other commissions.
Yeah.
She's running what you would be doing, you would be checking tourism, you'd be checking at the government service, you'd be checking a lot of boxes. I think you had a very good point though, because you can't just get the money and run. You have to get somebody.
Right, that speaks to the application process.
no, my only question was if one organization is unable to lead an effort to address one of these 11 areas, but it's in the best interest, it's in the interest of the town, I won't say best interest, but it's in the interest of the town in meeting one of these, does the town have a process outside of community initiative after the fact? I think at one meeting we talked about, we look at how we've addressed all 11, and if there's a hole, we address the hole.
Exactly.
That was kind of where I'm
Yes,
heading with
I agree
it.
with you. Should nobody apply for affordable housing? We have a hole. We have a hole.
Right.
And what do we do as a committee? So,
What is your mission for the EDC? What's the marching orders of the commission?
To support existing businesses and, have smart growth. Smart growth.
Which this theory that you're speaking of seems to fit into that mission.
Yeah, I don't need to take a lot of time on it here. My issue is manpower
Right.
and authority and, getting all the different players.
Cheryl, I would suggest that you reach out to zoning, Tim's office, even Ed,
Okay.
Phil, whatever, and say, this is an idea, and just say,
What do we have?
is there buy-in from any other groups? Because basically, it's got to be a group thing, it's not just one. because it's a bigger project than just one group.
You've also got to consider historic district, because one of those signs is probably going to be in this.
Well, it wouldn't, because we can't have signs in the historic
Wouldn't
district.
there
But
be
like
one of the-
Halls
like Halls Road
Road,
intersects with
156
Route
near
1?
Soundview, you know, where there's already a bunch of junky signs, replacing them with the nice sign. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, sorry.
When talking about the meeting schedule, I know we said we're not going to meet on the 20th and we're going to meet on the 27th. What about beyond that? And I'm thinking maybe it's time we come up with a schedule for application review. We have a deadline, we know when they're going to be here, and I think if we put some benchmarks in place, it'll help us plan our own spring
Probably
schedule.
depends on the volume that we have to process.
Yes, I get that, but like if we're working backwards, you know, we know what date we want to present our recommendations, and so I think if we're going to have an all-day session, you know, we should get that on the calendar. And we probably can't do that today. We probably all have to go back and look at our calendars. We have to get Rick's calendar. And maybe we can start coming up with a couple options, though. I mean, what the applications are due on Monday, May 2.
Second.
And we need a couple days to sort them out and put them in categories and figure out who's going to review them. And maybe by the end of that week, we could have applications in our hands. Like I could get the 6 to 8 to 25 that I'm going to be reviewing. You know, we also have to factor George into that too. And so,
Okay, so
I mean,
let me ask a couple of technical questions, or just housekeeping questions. Are you going to want the applications in electronic
Yes.
or print form?
electronic. I think we'll scan them and put them in
Okay.
a PDF and in a Google Drive that for each reviewer have a name and they can log in and view them.
Yep, okay. So scanning's going to take a while?
I do it as they come in, if they're paper applications. I've already been doing it.
A lot of them are going to come in electronically.
Yeah.
But they're going to come in that way.
They're already
Most of them
There's
are.
only been 3 more.
Yeah. See what that looks like in 3 weeks, Jim. We'll be glad you said that.
They're going to arrive digitally for the most part, so I think it's just putting them in the right folder. It's
Yeah.
gonna-
Okay. How about
How about what?
well, I think we just sketch out a timeline and maybe by next meeting. Well, I think we sketch out a timeline and how about if I sketch out a timeline for reviewing?
Okay.
And
Excellent.
so saying, and I'll send it out so that you'll have it now. You can make any edits and revisions to it as necessary. And I'll give you some possibilities of dates that look
Is the
promising.
Board of Selectmen meeting that we'll present at going to be the last item on that list?
Yes, and that will have to be because our charge was basically through June 30th, correct? The recommendation, so you're going to the July meeting for Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
That would be that, because that will give us the month to finish. And the only thing I would suggest is that, and this is another housekeeping thing, is I would think that there should be a 3 to 5 sentence summary of why each of those projects were chosen, or there's 4, in simplified
Decision.
form.
The decision.
Because we're not going to plot, I mean, the selectmen will want to read them, I'm sure, at some point, if they have to make decisions. But I think that we have to give a summarized statement of here's what we're doing for infrastructure, here's what you're doing for tourism, here's what
Sure.
you're doing, whatever, and this is why.
Well, you
And-
look how they did it in Eastland, and each proposal was voted on individually, you know, so I think definitely coming up with a 2-sentence summary of, you know,
Yeah.
this project funds such and such, we're funding it at 50% because.
Okay. So that would be part of our final report, or your final report that I...
I just wanted to talk about the time, if we want to do it at night or weekends or whatever, to move people on board. That can change too.
Night would be so nice for me. Anything.
That's up to you, everybody, but.
Even if we started at 4, brought in dinner, would be,
Okay, well, I think that you're going to come up with this timeline.
that I think...
And that, I think, give us a window of when we have to have this retreat session, or whatever you want to call it, and then we can start to look at dates,
Okay.
keeping in mind that my daughter's getting married.
When? When's
Okay,
your wedding?
June 11th.
Okay, well, I'm going from the 12th
Oh.
to the 25th.
And I will
I
not.
thought you were gone.
It's May.
No, May, I'm going
June?
for 4 days.
April.
I'm at the Van Gogh exhibit.
Oh,
I'm not here. Oh, we're not having a meeting on the 20th.
the 27th.
27th.
7th, we're back.
I don't think I'm here on the 27th either. I don't know yet.
Here.
So let me just put together a quick timeline,
Yeah.
see if you
Okay.
guys like it.
Okay.
Everybody edit, revise.
Lots of emails about to come.
More emails?
We're getting a lot of
Just
comments.
so you know,
Yes, we are.
if anyone's interested, I had put together this, just the Board of Finance was coming today. I ran this by, we thought they might be visiting.
Yeah.
But I just put together this, our accomplishments to date, and then I did on the back, well, it goes to the back, and the back are sort of our expected date, what
Oh,
might
okay.
happen.
Yeah.
So if you would like a copy.
That would be great.
I can put it on the
So
website.
Feel free,
Okay.
you know, just so you know what
Here,
you're
I'll
in for.
pass them down.
Thank you very much.
And Thomas, you have, I'll send you an electronic one if you want to send it to David Kelsey. That's,
Send it to me, I can even post it on the website.
there you go. Well, let's look at it and see if he wants to do that.
Color sharp. Okay. We all set?
Oh,
Public comment.
I have one more.
What? No, because they were invited to attend this meeting, they wanted to get an update, and we didn't hear back. Maybe that was it.
So my question relates to what Cheryl brought up, thank you. I'm feeling I've been asked to go to a meeting to talk about a proposal. I'm like, I mean, I know these are all public meetings, so I just want to be transparent. I mean, can I help someone?
I think absolutely.
Yeah, because you're not gonna read their application.
Right, okay.
You're not
all of
reviewing your
All
application.
of you are gonna put in applications,
Okay.
I'm putting one in, Dave's putting one in, Mary's putting
I
one in.
mean, we're all here to represent a sector, and you're
Right.
representing the faith sector.
Yeah.
So it's not that next
Okay,
year.
but, all right,
That's all right.
but, you know, so then
Yeah.
you accuse yourself, you're not gonna be a
Yeah.
reviewer for that application,
Yeah,
you know?
That's kind of, I mean, you have to
I
recuse
just wanted
yourself.
to say it out loud, so I
but-
felt.
No,
Okay.
So I
you're
didn't
fine.
You're absolved.
Okay. Well, when you
Okay.
make the assignment, you have to know.
Okay. I gotta go.
Okay, I gotta
Public
go.
comment.
Wait, public comment.
Public comment?
Comment.
Anybody?
This is your time.
Hey.
Oh, we're out.
Motion to
Motion to
adjourn.
adjourn.
Any discussion?
No.
Aye.